Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the read alouds that we actually accomplished in the 2023-2024 homeschool year. If you're new here, my name is Sarah and I'm a homeschooling mom to two girls, ages 11 and 15. Bella is in the 9th grade and Lydia is in the 6th grade, and read aloud time is usually something that happens in the morning. So it's usually part of our morning time or family subjects. And this year, I don't want to say it was an unsuccessful read aloud year, but it was nothing compared to our previous years homeschooling. I've been homeschooling, this is our 11th year, I believe. Yeah, it's our 11th year homeschooling, and this was probably the worst year for us when it came to family read alouds. Now we are almost done with the 2023-2024 homeschool year. We typically homeschool until around the end of May, so we have about a month left, but I kind of wanted to get this filmed ahead of time because I'm going to be wrapping it up most likely after this last read aloud that we're currently on. So I'm trying to cut things back and just slowly shift into the summer months. So I did share a previous video about how I had chosen, 20 books for the school year. And I did say in that video that I wasn't expecting to get through all of them, but I was hoping to get through about half of them. My goal was kind of like 10 books to get through. I just created a bigger list so that we had options, to choose from. And you guys, I think we got through like 5 books. You'll see. I'm about to show you. But yeah, I think we only got through like 5 books as a family. So I went ahead and decided to add in Lydia's read alouds as well to this video, because I did pick out family read alouds, and then I had read alouds that I was going to do with just my 6th grader. So I'm kind of just combining those two together for this video because, again, we did not read a ton as a family like we normally do. And I know a lot of that had to do with my daughter, Bella, my 9th grader, going into high school. She had a very busy schedule. We had a couple of hiccups along the way during the homeschool year. We got really busy around the holiday season, and then she decided to go ahead and start volunteering as a teacher's aide during 2nd semester. So things just got crazy over here, and it really cut into our morning time. So there's that, but overall it was still successful. We did choose a lot of books that we did enjoy. So let's kind of jump into it because like I said, I do want to share family read alouds and read alouds that I did with my 6th grader. There are a couple that I don't know where I put them. The first book is The Wild Robot Protects. Now, we love the Wild Robot series. This book came out at the beginning of the school year, and we just absolutely loved it. It was so good. I remember reading The Wild Robot and The Wild Robot, was it Returns or Escape? No, Wild Robot Escapes. And then this book, The Wild Robot Protects, is the third one. We read this book so quickly this year, and we just, like I said, we loved it. It's about this robot named Roz, and if you start, at the beginning of the book series, it's about how she is crashed onto an island and she learns how to survive there. And it just kind of, the other 2 books just follow, Roz's story. And it's a really, really sweet story. I do highly recommend these books. We thought they were so good, and we were so excited to hear that they are coming out with a movie. So we are really looking forward to the Wild Robot movie that should be coming out, I think, later this year. So really, really excited about that. Now, another book that I misplaced that I don't remember, was, which one was it? It was Song for a Whale. So this book, my youngest daughter really liked Song for a Whale. My oldest daughter just thought that it was okay. Song for a Whale is about a little girl who is deaf, and she's kind of struggling when it comes to communicating and making friends at school because she can't really communicate. Like, the kids at school don't know how to do sign language, and so it's just a struggle, and she's going through a really hard time, and she finds out about this whale in her science class named Blue, and how his song that he sings is not heard by any other whale. So he's a very lonely whale, and this little girl takes it upon herself to create this song for Blue so somebody can sing back to him. So it is a really sweet story. It was very touching, but again, my oldest daughter daughter just thought that it was okay. My youngest daughter really, really liked it. So it was successful. It was a successful read aloud for us. It's just, this one took us a little bit longer to get through because it was during like the holiday season. So I want to say it probably took us almost 2 months just to read this one book, but my kids did enjoy it overall. Now, the next book that I don't have is this one was just because I didn't want to go back into my library and pull it out, but it was A Christmas Carol. So we do read this one every single year, and this year was the first year that I had this really beautiful like leather bound version of it. It had pictures throughout it. It was a very beautiful copy of A Christmas Carol, and we really did enjoy it. But I mean, we read it every year, so I don't know, should I count that? Should I count that as like a book read? I mean, it technically was, but we do read it every year. I mean, Ebenezer Scrooge, you know, the three ghosts, you know the story, right? You know the story, but it is a very good book and we enjoy it every year. So that one was on the list. And now the other ones I actually have. So the next book that we read was The Thing About the Jellyfish. Now, this one I knew was going to be sad because just by reading the back of it, it is about loss. I am glad that I waited to read this book to my kids when they were a little bit older. I don't think that my kids would have responded well to this book if they were, you know, in elementary school. So I do feel that this was a good one to read, you know, middle school, high school, but it is about a little girl that loses her best friend and the struggles that come with that. So just keep that in mind if this is something that you're interested in. But The Thing About Jellyfish, it was a good book, but, you know, there was a lot of, you know, stuff in there that, I would say would probably be better for older kids. But again, if you're interested in it, I would definitely recommend like looking into it before you read it to your child, especially if you have a more sensitive child, because it did cover, you know, a lot of grief and loss and sadness and, you know, outbursts and things like that. So, but it was overall a pretty good read. Again, this is another one that took us like 2 months to read. But again, it was because we were busy. So it did take us a while to read it, but I am glad that we accomplished this one. Okay, so the next one that we read is The Witch of Blackbird Pond. Now, we all loved this book. It was so good. We read it in only a couple of days because we just could not put it down. But this is about Kit and how she kind of grew up on the island of Barbados. And after her grandfather died, she kind of gets shipped away to live with other relatives. And her way of life in Barbados was much different than where she moves to. And it was a really hard transition and people looked at her as different. But it was a very, very good book. I mean, this one, honestly, this one and The Wild Robot Protects were my favorite ones that we read this year because they were just so good. But again, we couldn't put this one down. So I do highly recommend this one. It is so good. Okay, and the last family read aloud before I get into Lydia's read alouds is The Case for Easter. Now, I wasn't even planning on reading this year. It is a very short read, but it was a very heavy read. It is about an investigative journalist. He was an atheist turned Christian where he was trying to go and pretty much like research and find out about the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. So this was a challenging read, but we all did enjoy the read. It made us think, it made us, you know, talk, have great conversation. But again, it was a very heavy read because it is detailed in some areas about some of the things that had happened during, you know, that time. And there was days that we just had to kind of pause our reading because it was a little intense, but we did get through it and we did really like it actually. We did enjoy this book, but this was the last one we actually did as a family read aloud, and I don't think I'm going to continue to try and even squeeze in a family read aloud the rest of this school year because we have just been so busy. But now let's go over the books that I read to just my 6th grader. Now, I did much better when it came to reading to my 6th grader this year than I did to my whole family. And I think it's because I do work very closely with Lydia when it comes to her, you know, being homeschooled, I guess you could say. We do a lot of her subjects together still, so it was a little bit easier for me to get Lydia to sit with me and listen to a story than it was to get Bella, who was extremely busy with school and, you know, volunteering and, you know, and all of that. So my goal for Lydia was to read 10 of the 12 books that I read, and I think we got through 8 or 9 of them. So I did much better here, but let me talk about some of the books that we enjoyed this year, and that is The Jungle Book. She did really enjoy The Jungle Book. There was a couple of times where she had a hard time understanding what they were saying, so we would have to kind of go back and reread it and kind of discuss it because some of the terminology or vocabulary was a little bit different than what she's used to. But overall, she did really enjoy The Jungle Book, and we did watch the movie after. Okay, now this one, Archimedes and the Door of Science. This wasn't necessarily on my list for read alouds for her. It was kind of more to go along with her history. We did not enjoy this one, you guys. This one was not a win for us. I don't want to say it was necessarily bad, but we had a really hard time just getting into this story. We had a really hard time just keeping our focus on it. I mean, it took us a little while to read just because we were kind of over it. And I did skip a couple of parts in this book just because we weren't feeling it. We did finish almost all of this book, but it just wasn't for us. And to be honest, you guys, I thought that this was going to be a book that I was going to love. I was hearing so many fantastic things about Archimedes and the Door of Science. And then when we started reading it, I was like, I was like, I don't like this. She didn't like it. It wasn't a good fit for us. So like I said, we read through most of it. We skipped, you know, a little bit here and there, but overall we didn't really enjoy it. So there's that. Now, another book that I read to her was Book 4, The Sandman and the War of Dreams. Now, this is from the Guardian series. So if you've ever seen that movie, Rise of the Guardians, this is kind of like the story of the Sandman. My kids loved these books. And we started with Book 4 because Lydia had already read books 1 through 3 the previous year. And I decided to pick it up as a read aloud to try and help her get through them because she was having a challenging time with a book that's so thick. She's not my kid that loves to read a lot of like large books. She definitely prefers comics and graphic novels or short stories. So this is a bit of a challenge for her. But once I read this one to her and she got like back into the story, she took off with reading the other, I think it was the other two that were left in the series. So she did complete out the series, but this is the only one I did as a read aloud. So this one is about Sanderson Man Snoozy, so the Sandman or Sandy, if you're familiar with those movies, and how he has to kind of help out with a challenging situation with the other Guardians. So these are good books. We do really enjoy these. I was a little hooked. I actually went back and I read the other ones previously because if you watch my other video, I kind of stepped into the stories at Book 4. So I kind of went back and read them, and they are really good stories. So I do recommend this series. Now, another book that we read was one that I thought was going to be kind of more lighthearted and silly and fun, but it was actually really sad, and that was Crenshaw. So Crenshaw was a really good story, though. We actually really enjoyed this. It's about this little boy and his family that's going through hard times, and how at one point they were homeless, and he's kind of scared that that's going to happen again. And every time these like scary or stressful situations occur, his imaginary friend Crenshaw the cat appears. So this is a really, really good story. I am glad that we read this one. Lydia really enjoyed it. And I had this kind of like on my list to read to her for a couple of years now. So I'm really glad we got to it this year. This one was a lot of fun, but again, it was silly and sad all at the same time, you know, so it was a good read. Okay, the next one that we read is Fantastic Mr. Fox. Now, this was recommended by Bella for me to read to Lydia this year because Bella's favorite author is Roald Dahl. So she was like, you have to mix in a couple of Roald Dahl books. She'll love them. So we read Fantastic Mr. Fox. She loved it. It's about a fox that gets into a lot of trouble and how he's trying to save his family and some of the other, you know, underground creatures. But this one, it's a really short read. So I think we read this one in like 2 or 3 days. So we got through this one really quickly. And again, we did watch that movie after, but she really loved this one. Okay, next up we have James and the Giant Peach. If you're not familiar with this one, there is a movie which we did watch, but this is about a little sad boy that goes on an adventure in a really large peach with really large insects. So it's a very silly story, and it is very different from the movie. Let me just say that. Lydia did prefer the book, but she was laughing and smiling and having such a great time when we were reading this book. It was so much fun to her. She really loved kind of like the different attitudes between the insects. So she did really enjoy it. Again, it's a very silly story. I'm so glad I took the time to read this one to her. So this next book is where we got kind of stuck reading through a series. So we kind of stopped, you know, reading the books that were on our list to continue on with this series because she just loved it so much. And there are like 12 books, I think, in this series, and she is currently on book 10. But this one is How to Train Your Dragon, book 1. She loved this so much. If you're not familiar with this series follows Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III. He is the son of a Viking chief, and it's kind of like his journey with him training his dragon and, you know, just everything that he goes through. It is a silly book. Now, some of the language in here might be a little rough for some people. We didn't really mind it. You know, it didn't bother us or anything, but do keep that in mind. It can get a little rough around the edges, but overall, she loved this book. Just remember though, Lydia loves dragons, reptiles, dinosaurs. She loves all of that. So the silliness of this book with the dragons tied in, it was just something I knew she was going to love. And we did watch the movies with it, which are very different than the book series. And again, I think there's 12 of these, and she is currently on book 10, I believe. But once I read this one to her, I couldn't even get the second book delivered fast enough for her. She went onto the Libby app and borrowed a free audio version through our library, and she just took off with that. So I only read her book 1, but again, she's currently on book 10, and she's been kind of listening to that audio version for the other books, and she is loving them so much. Now, the last book that we are working through is Little Women. As you can see, we're still working on it, but I did want to mention this one even though we didn't finish, because we are really loving this book. So I had originally read Lydia a shorter version of Little Women when she was younger. It was kind of more like a picture book version of Little Women, but she's really loving this big old thick copy of Little Women. Now, she is able to point out some of the quotes and stuff from the movie into this book because we are big fans of the, you know, 90s version Little Women movie. So she is able to kind of point those out and see the differences already from the book and the movie, even though we're only about halfway through. But if she does want to, we will continue to read through the rest of the books of Little Women. I think there's like Joe's Boys, Little Men, Good Wives, something, I don't know. There's a bunch of them, like 5 or 6 of them. So if she does want to continue to read on through the Little Women series, we will. But this is the last book that I have planned and mapped out for this school year. So those are all of the books that we did as read alouds. Again, there's really only one flop in there for us. Overall, I feel like we enjoyed pretty much everything that we read except for that one this year. So if you have any questions, please leave them down below. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by. You have a great day. Bye.